The wind coming off Lake Michigan was brutal, even in the middle of June, whipping across the rooftop garden of the Chicago high-rise. I kept my back to the edge, the light fabric of my button-up shirt snapping against my shoulders. The air smelled of hot concrete, exhaust fumes, and the sweet, out-of-place scent of the hydrangeas blooming in the heavy concrete planters. Madeline Gardner stood 2 feet away from me. She wasn't looking at the skyline. She was staring at her smartphone. Her striking white curls, a premature silver she wore like a crown instead of hiding it, blew across her face. She reached up with a manicured hand, tucking a loose coil behind her ear. She was wearing a tailored pink sleeveless top that stood out sharply against the muted greens of the rooftop foliage. It was a rare break from her usual slate gray blazers. I watched the tension in her shoulders, the rigid line of her spine. She was the CEO, my boss, and right now, she looked like she wanted to throw her phone into the Chicago traffic 20 stories below. "This is a disaster, Jackson," she said, her voice tight. She tapped the screen with her thumb, a short, aggressive motion. "I am negotiating a $30 million acquisition, and I can't figure out why every man the algorithm shows me is holding a fish." I shifted my weight. The fatigue behind my eyes, a constant ache from 3 nights of auditing shell entities for the firm, throbbed a steady rhythm. "The algorithm optimizes for engagement, Madeline, not compatibility." She looked up at me. The sunlight caught the faint, exhausted lines at the corners of her eyes. "I need a favor. I'm your forensic accountant. I find missing money. I don't fix algorithms." "It's not just the app," she said, lowering the phone. Her grip on the device was white-knuckled. "It's a professional favor, paid, billable hours. I have exactly 3 weeks before the board vote on the Vance merger." Sarah in HR kindly suggested that the board thinks I'm a machine, that I have no life outside the ledger. They want a leader who connects. So, I am connecting. She offered a dry, humorless smile. Or trying to. "But my profile is apparently a liability. I need you to audit it. Treat it like a hostile prospectus." I looked at the phone in her hands, then I looked at her. The sheer exhaustion radiating off her mirrored my own. She was running on fumes, fighting a boardroom that wanted her out, and now she was trying to schedule engineer human connection just to keep her job. "Hand it over," I said, keeping my voice flat, holding out my hand. She hesitated, then placed the phone in my palm. The metal backing was warm from her grip. I didn't linger on the transfer. I looked down at the screen. Her bio read like a LinkedIn summary. Driven executive, results-oriented, seeking efficient partnership. "You sound like you're hiring a middle manager," I muttered, scrolling past a guy holding a trout. "I value efficiency," she defended, crossing her arms over her chest. "You value control," I corrected quietly, handing the phone back. Our fingers didn't brush. I made sure of it. "I'll draft some revisions and send them to your secure email tonight, but right now, we need to talk about Vance. His Q3 expenditure projections don't align with his operational capacity." The mention of our rival VP caused the softness to instantly vanish from her face. Vance was aiming for her seat. He had the board's ear, and he had been quietly documenting complaints about Madeline's rigid leadership style for months. "We review Vance's bid at 5, Madeline said, her tone shifting back to pure steel. "Don't be late, Jackson." She turned and walked back toward the glass doors leading inside. I stayed on the roof for another minute, letting the cold wind hit my face, grounding myself before the chaos of the afternoon started. By 5 o'clock, the sun was cutting harsh angles through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive boardroom. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my laptop open. Madeline sat at the head. Vance was pacing near the screen, presenting his restructuring bid. Vance was all polish and zero substance. He wore suits that cost more than my car, and his smiles never reached his eyes. The synergies here are undeniable, Vance was saying, pointing to a bar graph that meant nothing. By consolidating the supply chain, we drop overhead by 14% in the first year. I looked at the raw data file he had sent over 10 minutes prior. I didn't look at the graph. I looked at the depreciation schedules. I tapped my pen once against my legal pad. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Vance stopped talking. Madeline turned her head toward me. "Problem, Mr. Hart?" Vance asked, a patronizing edge in his voice. I kept my eyes on the screen. "Your overhead reduction isn't coming from supply chain consolidation. It's coming from deferring maintenance on the regional hubs. You've capitalized operating expenses to inflate the short-term margin." I scrolled down, highlighting 3 cells. "If the board approves this bid, you'll show a profit in Q1 and a catastrophic infrastructure failure by Q4. It's a textbook liability shift." The room went dead silent. Vance's jaw tightened. "That is an aggressive misinterpretation of standard accounting practices." "It's math," I said simply. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I forwarded the corrected spreadsheet to the entire board's email list with one keystroke. The liabilities are real. The 14% savings is fiction. Madeline didn't smile, but the subtle relaxation of her shoulders told me everything. "Thank you, Jackson." "Vance, please revise these figures by Monday. We won't present fiction to the board." The meeting adjourned in a tense, thick silence. Vance shot me a look of pure malice before walking out. I closed my laptop, the exhaustion settling heavily into my bones. "You made an enemy today," Madeline said quietly, gathering her folders. "I don't care about Vance," I replied, standing up. "I care about the numbers. The numbers don't lie." Later that evening, the office was mostly empty. The hum of the servers down the hall was the only sound. I was sitting at my desk, rubbing my temples, staring at the dating app screenshots Madeline had sent me. I had promised to fix it. I heard the soft click of heels. Madeline walked into my office without knocking. She looked drained. She dropped a file on my desk, then sat in the guest chair opposite me. "Vance is going to retaliate," she said, staring at the file. "He's got 3 board members in his pocket. If my profile doesn't look human enough at the gala next week, and if my numbers aren't airtight, I'm out." I didn't answer right away. I opened my bottom drawer and pulled out a small insulated thermos. I poured a cup of Earl Grey tea, steeped exactly 4 minutes, a splash of oat milk, no sugar. I slid it across the desk toward her. She stopped talking. She looked at the tea, then at me. "How did you know?" "You order it every Tuesday at 2 p.m. from the downstairs cafe," I said, keeping my tone strictly professional. "You skipped lunch today. Drink it." She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic lid. The tremor in her fingers slowly stopped. "Thank you." "Your dating profile," I said, shifting the topic to give her an out from the vulnerability. I turned my monitor so she could see the document I had typed up. "I audited your matches. You're filtering by income and job title. You're attracting opportunists, men who want a CEO, not a partner." She frowned, sipping the tea. "What should I filter by?" "Consistency," I said. "Look for the guys who write in complete sentences, but don't brag. The ones with pictures in messy kitchens, not just on yachts." I scrolled down to a rewritten bio I had drafted. I changed your summary. "Works hard, but knows how to appreciate a quiet Sunday. Looking for someone who understands that partnership means showing up, even when it's not glamorous." Madeline read the words in silence. The harsh fluorescent light of the office caught the silver in her hair. "That sounds soft." "It sounds real," I countered. "You don't need another board member in your life, Madeline. You need a soft landing." She looked at me for a long, quiet moment. The silence stretched, heavy and complicated. I felt the sudden urge to reach across the desk and ease the tension from her shoulders, but I kept my hands firmly on my keyboard. I wasn't here to cross lines. I was here to keep her safe. "Send it to me," she whispered finally. By week 4, the pressure was suffocating. Vance wasn't just revising his numbers, he was actively sabotaging ours. I was waist-deep in a forensic trace of the corporate ledger when the red flags started popping up. An entire sub-account tied to Madeline's operational budget had been frozen. I stood up from my desk, my chair rolling back hard against the wall. I walked straight to Madeline's office. The door was closed. I knocked once and entered. She was standing by the window, her back to me, her arms wrapped around herself. "The Q3 operational account is locked," I said, closing the door behind me. She didn't turn around. "I know. The bank flagged a compliance issue. Someone reported an irregularity in my division spending." "Vance," I said. The anger was a cold, quiet thing in my chest. "It takes 3 weeks to clear a compliance freeze," Madeline said, her voice thin, fragile. "The board vote is in 2 weeks. Without that operational capital, my department stalls. I miss my targets. Vance wins." She finally turned to face me. The formidable CEO was gone. In her place was a woman who had given her entire life to a company only to be locked out of her own house. A tear broke free and tracked down her cheek. I didn't offer empty platitudes. I didn't tell her it was going to be okay. I walked over to the small sitting area in her office and sat down on the leather sofa. I took my phone out of my pocket, placed it face down on the coffee table, and looked at her. "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. She hesitated, then walked over and sat on the opposite end of the sofa. She pulled her knees together, making herself small. "We have 2 weeks," I said, my voice steady, an anchor in the storm. "Vance used a backdoor reporting mechanism. I can trace the IP of the whistleblower report. If I prove it originated from his division, the freeze is invalidated under the malicious interference clause." "He covered his tracks, Jackson. He's not stupid." "He's arrogant," I corrected. "Arrogance leaves a paper trail. I will find it. You just need to keep the department running." "How?" she asked, a dry sob escaping her throat. "I can't authorize payroll. I can't pay the vendors." "You have personal liquidity," I said quietly. It was a massive risk. I hated suggesting it. Madeline's eyes widened. "You want me to bridge the operational gap with my own money?" "It protects your dignity," I said. "You set your own terms. You draft a short-term, interest-bearing loan agreement from your personal trust to the corporation. If you do that, the board can't say you failed to lead. They'll have to acknowledge you saved the quarter." "If you don't find the proof against Vance," she started, her voice shaking. "I will find it," I said. I looked her dead in the eye. "I have never failed an audit. I won't start with yours." The panic in her eyes slowly receded, replaced by the steady, familiar steel. She let out a long, shaky exhale. The room suddenly felt very quiet. The chaotic noise of the crisis was blocked out by the simple fact of a plan. "Okay," she breathed. For the next 10 days, the office became a bunker. Madeline funded the gap, a power move that left the board stunned and Vance furious. I dug into the network architecture. It was late Friday night. The air conditioning had shut off hours ago. I was staring at a terminal screen, my eyes burning, tracing encrypted routing numbers. Madeline was sitting at my desk, reviewing vendor contracts. "He bounced the IP through a proxy in Delaware," I muttered, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "But he used his corporate card to pay for the VPN subscription." Madeline stopped reading. "You found the receipt?" "I found the digital ledger entry," I confirmed, hitting print. The printer whirred to life, spitting out 3 pages of undeniable proof. I grabbed the warm paper and handed it to her. Chain of custody is clean. Timestamps match the compliance report. She looked at the paper, her hands trembling slightly. You did it. We did it, I corrected. She looked up at me. We were standing too close. The office was dim, lit only by the glow of the monitors. I could smell the faint trace of vanilla in her perfume. The distance between us felt heavy, charged with a sudden, sharp gravity. I saw her lean in just a fraction of an inch. My chest tightened. Every instinct I had told me to close the gap, to pull her in and let the tension snap. But I saw the exhaustion in her posture, the sheer vulnerability of a woman who had been fighting for her professional life for months. If I kissed her now, it would be a reaction to the adrenaline. It would blur the lines when she needed absolute clarity. I clenched my jaw, my hands staying firmly at my sides. I took a deliberate half-step back. Take this to legal in the morning, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Get the freeze lifted. Madeline blinked, the spell breaking. She looked at the space between us, then nodded slowly. A look of profound respect settled over her features. I hadn't taken advantage. I had kept the sanctuary safe. Thank you, Jackson. The day of the board vote arrived with the force of a hammer. The boardroom was packed. The air was thick with expensive cologne and tension. Vance was at the podium presenting the final merger contract. He was arrogant, assured of his victory. This merger is the only path forward, Vance declared, sliding a thick bound contract across the table toward the chairman. We sign today, and we secure the future. Madeline sat completely still beside me. I pulled the contract toward me before the chairman could reach it. What are you doing, Hart? Vance snapped. I didn't answer. I opened the document, my eyes scanning the dense legalese. I wasn't reading the summary. I was reading the penalty clauses. Page 42, paragraph 3. I stopped. The trap was right there. You didn't disclose the debt assumption in the prospectus, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. Vance paled. That is standard boilerplate. It's a hostile leverage clause, I said, looking up at the chairman. If you sign this, the acquiring firm assumes our assets but forces us to carry their toxic debt from the European division. Within 6 months, they will liquidate us to cover their margin calls. I stood up. I took the merger contract in my hands, gripped the binding, and ripped it straight down the middle. The sound of tearing paper was deafening. I tossed the torn halves onto the center of the mahogany table. The contract is a death warrant, I stated calmly. I pulled the Delaware IP proxy receipts from my folder and placed them next to the ruined contract. And the compliance freeze on Ms. Gardner's account was initiated by Mr. Vance, using company funds to obscure his identity in a direct attempt to sabotage her operational metrics. The chairman picked up the IP receipts. He looked at Vance. Vance was completely silent, his arrogance shattered into a million pieces. Ms. Gardner, the chairman said, his voice grave. You bridged the operational gap with personal funds? Madeline stood up. She didn't look at Vance. She looked at the board. I believe in this company. I lead by action, not by sabotage. The department is solvent. The merger is dead. The fallout was swift and brutal. By noon, Vance was escorted out of the building by security. The board unanimously rejected the merger and reaffirmed Madeline's position. The war was over. That evening, I walked up the stairs to the rooftop garden. The sun was setting over the city, casting a warm, golden glow across the concrete and glass. Madeline was already there. She was standing by the edge, looking out at the skyline. She was wearing her gray blazer, but her shoulders were completely relaxed. The rigid armor was gone. I walked up beside her, leaving a respectful foot of distance between us. Legal is drafting Vance's severance, I said, leaning my forearms on the railing. And the bank unfroze your accounts an hour ago. I know, she said quietly. She turned to look at me. The golden hour light caught the silver in her hair, making it shine. The board offered me a 5-year extension. You earned it. She shook her head slightly. I survived it. Because of you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone. She tapped the screen a few times, then held it out so I could see. It was the dating app. She hit the delete account button. A prompt asked if she was sure. She pressed yes. The screen went back to her home menu. She slipped the phone back into her pocket. She looked up at me, a genuine, warm smile breaking across her face. It was the first time I had seen her truly smile without the weight of the company crushing her. I don't think I need to filter by consistency anymore, she said softly. I think I already found the guy who knows how to show up. She took a step closer. The safe distance I had maintained for 6 weeks vanished. She reached out, her fingers gently wrapping around my wrist. It wasn't a desperate grab. It was an anchor. The tremor in her hand was gone. The world stopped spinning. Do you want to date me, Jackson? She asked, her voice clear and certain. I looked down at her hand on my wrist. I felt the steady, calm reality of the moment. There was no more running, no more hiding behind ledgers and crisis management. Yes, I said, the word heavy and absolute. I didn't pull her into a frantic embrace. I reached up with my free hand and gently cupped the side of her face. My thumb brushed over her cheekbone. She leaned into the touch, letting out a long, quiet exhale that sounded like coming home. I leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a spark or an explosion. It was the closing of a contract, a destination reached. It felt like the sudden silence that falls when a storm finally breaks, leaving only solid ground beneath our feet. Closing thoughts. Real love isn't about drama or chaos. It's about consistency, protecting each other's dignity, and simply showing up when it counts. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.